And now it is my great privilege to introduce a speaker who's making a mark across many communities. She's a University of Miami professor and director of the Contemplative Neuroscience Mindfulness Research and Practice Initiative. And she has brought the practice of mindfulness to not only students and families and organizations, but to soldiers, veterans, the police, and more. Please be sure to look out for her new book out in October, Peak Mind. And here to tell us about her work is my colleague and friend, Dr. Amishi Jha.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here today. So 100 years ago, the idea that somebody would get on a bicycle that's had its back wheel removed to pedal as hard and fast as they can for 30 minutes at a time would have sounded absolutely preposterous. If you saw somebody running down the street, you probably assumed that they were being chased somehow. But of course, fast forward to today. If we enter any gym and even peek into people's homes, we'll see people on stationary bikes, sweating away, or on a treadmill, getting in their steps. And why is it? Why is it in 2021 that we see physical activity, physical exercise in particular, happening so frequently? Well, because we know, and our public health officials can give us precise evidence-based guidance that physical activity, physical exercise is necessary for our physical well-being. So what about the mind? Are there mental exercises we can do for our mental health and our mental well-being? This is a question that my laboratory has been exploring for the last decade and a half or so. And the answer is yes, there are certainly things that we can do daily to help us stay mentally fit. But before we get into that, I think it's very important for us to understand what it is that ails us. What are the challenges to our mental well-being? And one of them I know is obvious and experienced by all of us. Is described in one word: stress. Stress, of course, is that feeling, that overwhelming feeling, where we perceive that our capacity to handle all that is demanded of us and our own ability to do so are just mismatched. We can't quite manage it all. And after 15 plus months of a global pandemic, we know what it feels like to experience stress. We know what it feels like to have disruption to our daily routines, our ways of going to school, our ways of working, our ways of connecting have all been disrupted. Some of the groups that we work with describe periods of high stress with the term VUCA, V-U-C-A. And that's actually an acronym. V for volatile, U for uncertain, C for complex, and A for ambiguous. These are the circumstances that actually produce stress in our lives and in our bodies. And of course, we know that stress is terribly damaging for most of the systems of our body. But it ends up that stress is also quite damaging for a brain system that is important for everything we do. And this happens to be a brain system that I study in my laboratory, known as the brain's attention system. So attention is an extremely complex system that is quite powerful. We need it for every single thing we do. In fact, your ability to even listen to and comprehend my words relies on your attention. We know we need attention to think. We need attention to deliberate, consider alternatives, learn, comprehend. But we also need attention to actually regulate our mood and to feel. And the third thing that attention is quite beneficial for is our ability to connect. We actually devote our attention to other people. That's how we can make sure they understand us and that we understand them. So this incredibly powerful brain system that's tied to our ability to think, feel, and act doesn't actually fully develop till we're in about our mid-20s. It relies on the brain structures known as the frontal lobes, and those actually don't develop until we're in our 20s. And then, unfortunately, by the time we're in our mid-30s or so, the frontal lobes start degrading or diminishing in their functioning. So we do have some pressure to try to work hard and keep our attention system strong and healthy. And as we'll discuss over the next few minutes, though that same brain system is really key for our psychological well-being. So in order to really be able to conduct these complex functions, thinking, feeling, connecting, the brain's attention system is divided into three main subsystems. And I'll use some metaphors to help us understand what those are. One way we can think about attention is probably the most common way you think about it, your ability to focus. And that's described by what I call the flashlight of attention. And just like an actual flashlight, this system, formerly known as the brain's orienting system, allows us to really direct the brain's computational resources to a subset of information. So just like if you were walking down a dark path and you wanted to guide your way, you'd use a flashlight, and anything that was within that flashlight's focus would get privileged access. You'd get more information about it. Same thing with the brain's orienting system. Whatever it is that we pay attention to, we get privileged access, higher quality access. We can direct that flashlight to the external environment, to sights and sounds. We can also direct that flashlight internally, to our thoughts and feelings and memories. So the flashlight is quite powerful and important. A second system of attention is very different than the flashlight, almost the opposite of the flashlight. This is something called the brain's alerting system. And more than a flashlight, it's more like a floodlight. It's quite a broad and diffuse. And if you want to think about your attention system's alerting subsystem really functioning, think about the last time you were driving on the road, or maybe even walking, and you saw a flashing yellow light. Something like a construction zone or an odd traffic pattern, something that said to you, be cautious, pay attention. When you see something like that, you usually don't know what exactly it is that you should be paying attention to, but you know you need to keep attention broad and ready so that whatever it is, quickly you can deploy your attention and really benefit from having your brain's information processing on what is needed. So whereas the flashlight is narrow, the floodlight is quite broad. And the third system of attention is different than both of those as well. It's something that I use the analogy of a juggler for this system. It's something called the central executive system of attention. And we use that term executive because very much like an executive of a company, the executive system's job is to manage what is going on, to ensure that our goals and our behavior align. I think of it as a juggler because it's like keeping all the balls in the air. We just got to make sure none of the balls drop. That's very, very important. So all three of these systems, the flashlight, the floodlight, and the juggler, are very powerful. But when we experience stress, they don't function so well. So under stress, and particularly these VUCA circumstances, what happens is that flashlight gets caught on depressogenic thoughts. It can't kind of pull away, and we end up experiencing psychological disorders such as depression. Or under high stress circumstances, everything we walk around experiencing is as if there's a caution sign or a blinking yellow traffic light. The floodlight of attention becomes in this alert and hypervigilant state. This is really what happens under high stress circumstances, and we experience things like anxiety and PTSD when the floodlight is in overdrive. And of course, under stress, that juggler can certainly drop the ball. Our behavior and our goals are mismatched. They just don't align. This is often experienced in disorders like ADHD, attention deficit challenges that many of us may experience. So depression, anxiety, ADHD, these are fundamental and unfortunately very common psychological health challenges that many of us have. And they really have to do with the way we pay attention. So in my laboratory, we've been trying to come up with solutions, mental training solutions that will help mental health. What we have done is used mindfulness meditation training. Why mindfulness, you might ask? Well, mindfulness is quite powerful at retraining, strengthening the brain's attention system. A lot of the things that happen during stress have to do with the brain's powerful capacity to mentally time travel. So think back to the example I gave about depression and the flashlight getting caught on depressogenic thoughts. Those thoughts may not be happening in the moment because of circumstances that are right now. They may be because of a past memory. You have actually time traveled to the past and you're ruminating on events that have already happened. Mental time travel can also take us to the future, and unfortunately, this is what often happens in disorders like anxiety. We have worries, we are threatened, we are uncertain about what might happen, and that amps up the brain's alerting system. So all of a sudden now, we are experiencing a future that may not ever happen, but unfortunately leaves our psychological well-being quite compromised. So mental time travel, rewinding, fast forwarding, very powerful. We do it all the time, but unfortunately it's yoked to not being in the best psychological mood, especially under high stress situations. And by the way, not just mood, in serious psychological disorders. So mindfulness training is the opposite of having a mind that is time traveling to the past or the future. Mindfulness training has to do with keeping that button on our mind's own internal MP3 player right on play so that we are experiencing the moment-to-moment unfolding of our lives. It's very simple to do, quite portable, and we offer it to many high-stress groups, from military service members, first responders, medical and business professional, and students. And once we offer people these pocket practices that they can do anytime, it begins with a simple exercise such as paying attention to the breath in this moment, noticing the mind wandering away from the breath, and then gently returning it. When people do these practices over and over again for as little as 12 minutes a day, we find that their attention is strengthened. And our hope, and often we see this, is that with stronger attention systems, with the brain exercises of mindfulness, we can actually stave off psychological disorders and actually improve performance that when people have to function in complex and stressful circumstances. So what I want to leave you with is really to consider sort of a new view of mental well-being, which is in your own hands, and it involves training your brain's attention system. I hope you'll consider adding mindfulness training to your wellness toolkit so that you can stay psychologically fit and perform at your best. And I want to really thank the organizers of this event for the opportunity to share these insights with you. And I want to finally thank you for your attention. Thank you very much.